Hey everyone, and welcome to my office. I'm Susan Smith, and usually you're meeting me in my studio, which is Stitched by Susan, but I thought it would be fun to sit in front of a quilt to do this today. And this time I want to talk to you just a little bit about a review on a quilted coat that I recently made for my granddaughter, and I'll give you a quick glimpse of it. This is the front. Super cute little coat with pockets, but it's the back that's really the kicker. Look at that little fox. Oh my gosh, he's so cute. Okay, super, super cute. So this is, the pattern is called Little Fox Coat, and it's by Bound Co. and Worthy Design Studio. My understanding is that one of them originally designed a quilt with this fox, and then the other person made it into this coat adaptation. I don't know the full story, but anyway, Bound Co. and Worthy Design Studio are the designers, the co-designers. So let's talk about the process. There's multiple steps, not surprisingly, to a quilted coat, and this one had even more because it had some fairly detailed piecing first off. So check out the little fox. Like, he is seriously the cutest thing ever. And I want to say at the outset, the pattern is super well designed. So both the piecing and the coat construction are well thought through. I just thought this review would be helpful because there's things I learned as I went along that would have made it easier the second time around, and a couple of adaptations that are possible and ways that you could approach that and make it a lot easier too. It's not a super simple sew. Quilted coats kind of aren't, because you're dealing with something thicker than fabric, multiple layers, etc., etc. So first off, the piecing, which is quite detailed. It's important to take your time. The piecing pattern is very accurate. The measurements all worked, but we're talking smaller than an inch finished half square triangles in a lot of these foxy details. I think some of them are actually half an inch in this little part of his forehead, his furrowed forehead there. So it's tiny. So it's important to be precise, to press it well. And I pressed everything open. I can't honestly remember if that was in the instructions or not, to keep it as flat as humanly possible. So that was the piecing, and it took me the better part of a day just to piece the fox. From there, you add pieces around the fox to make a section large enough for the coat, and this is the first thing that I would have changed. The pattern does not necessarily instruct you to quilt it, but I knew from the beginning I wanted to make a quilted coat, and of course when you quilt, it inevitably pulls up just a little because you're putting all these layers and fluffiness together. So if I were doing it again, I would have cut my addition pieces a little more generously. I was limited then when I came to do my coat. I wanted to make it a little longer. It's for my little granddaughter, who is very, very dainty and slender. So I made a size 4. She's fixing to turn 4, but I could only add an inch. I would have liked to add 2 inches, and it would have fit her for a longer period of time because she is such a slim little thing, but there simply wasn't enough in the pieces I had added onto the fox, and I didn't have enough fabric to recut them. So just as a little side note, it's worth being a little more generous with an extra inch or 2 of fabric so that you've got a bigger piece to work with when you go to cut this out. So after I had pieced it, put those additional pieces on, then I quilted it. And I did quilt this in sections because the back was pieced as a section. Now, mind you, it was a big square, a little bigger than the back piece. Would have been bigger if I had added more fabric. But when I got to my quilting machine, then I was able to put that square on and to put a chunk beside it big enough to cut the 2 fronts, cut the 2 sleeves, cut the right and left of the hood, and the hood is constructed with a gusset as well. So all of that I could load on the long arm at once with 1 piece of backing. And I actually used different bits of batting. You know how we always have leftovers, right? This is a great way to use it up. I just made sure that I had the same kind of batting throughout the whole coat. So it all has the same feel, but you could, put a chunk for the back and a chunk across the sleeves, etc. And I just used my pattern pieces to lay on top and make sure my fabric and my batting piece was going to be generous enough to cut the piece I know I needed to achieve from there. From there, I did choose to do a digital quilting design. You can see it's very regular. It's kind of squares. and very much has 45-degree angles. And it was a toss-up for me between just doing straight parallel lines across the coat and doing these angles. And honestly, I think either would look good, but I thought this was a little more interesting, and because there's a lot of 45-degree angles in the fox, it fit really well. I did not want to do anything leafy with curves or distracting in any way from the fox. So I love this little design. And it is called Squared, and it's a pantograph by Leisha Kay, available in a number of places online. What else was I going to say about the quilting? Oh yes, thread choice. Might be difficult to see on there, but if I move it around, you can see a little. My thread is a much lighter shade than the coat. And again, I deliberated because I did have this teal color in thread, but I felt like on the fox, especially on his cheeks that are cream colored, that was so high contrast, and I didn't want that stitching to be so visible. So knowing what my inner part was, I did choose basically this color of thread. So it's a bit paler than the teal, but in fact looks quite nice and looks pleasing. And then throughout the construction process, I was able to use that same robin's egg blue thread for all of my top stitching, and so that makes it kind of cohesive. Now, here's where one thing where I had, it was a Y in the road and I could have gone either way. First off, the initial pattern is designed with the intention that the coat will be reversible. You can literally turn it inside out and wear it the other way. So the fox, and by the way, there's a couple other animals in this line. I think a polar bear, and I forget what the third one is. So if a fox is not your thing, but you want an animal coat, check out those same designers, look for their other coats. But they're all intended to be entirely reversible. So this particular coat, the instructions were to make a tail to fit on the inside and 2 ears that fit on the inside of the hood. So when you reverse the coat, you don't see the fox's face like this, you see his little tail and his little ears, which is super cute. But the intention was then that the lining should be the color of the fox, which makes good sense, right? And this was my mistake entirely. In my head, because I'm currently working on a quilted coat for myself, and that one I'm quilting the layers and that becomes the outer fabric, and then I'm adding a full lining. Somehow that was in my head. So I had tons and tons of this stripe, so I clapped this on the long arm, loaded up my coat, and was well into quilting it before I realized, oh, actually this is the inside of the coat, and I should have done it with this foxy color of fabric. So at that point is where my Y in the road came. I could decide, did I want to persevere with making it reversible and putting the ears and tail on, because the ears and tails would be this color because that's a fox. But I thought that would look weird on the striped inside of the coat. So my decision right there was, my coat's not going to be reversible. This makes a difference because some of the construction processes are thought through and planned just to achieve that reversibility. For example, the finish on the seams. Can you see the inside of my collar here? They're not just finished like with a serger and enclosed and trimmed. They're covered up so that you could literally turn this coat and wear it the other way. And I'll turn the sleeve inside out and you can see it. It looks pretty decent actually. My little hand can hardly get through the sleeve. There we go. Do you see? So it's all fully finished on the inside, which looks lovely, but proved to have some construction difficulties. And if I didn't want the reversible coat, it would have been far easier to line the coat and turn the whole thingy inside out, right? So one of the difficulties, for example, is when you're finishing the inner seam that runs up the side seam and then down the arm seam. The sleeve is already attached, so you're sewing that one long seam down the arm. You're top stitching this binding on and you're stitching along in here, and you continue stitching down the sleeve, scooching that under your sewing machine presser foot and stitching a few more stitches and scooching and a few more stitches and scooching as far as you can get into the sleeve, stitching that. When you've gone as far as you can go, then you turn it around and you start again from the cuff side and stitch inwards till you meet it. Really tough to stitch down such a small armhole. Again, I'm making a size 4 coat. If it was a bigger coat, that would be a bit easier too. So that all said, if you want the reversible coat, power through it. It can be done. I did it. It looks very neat and very lovely. But if you don't necessarily want the reversible coat, it's far easier than to just line it. make another coat exactly the same shape. It doesn't have to be shaped any differently. You know, this would just be a turned edge instead of a bound edge on all the perimeter of the coat. So that's my biggest tip there. So the finishing process then involved both this, it's like a flat fold binding, but just flat over these seams, over the little collar, and then around the perimeter of the coat itself, the cuffs of the sleeves, and even the pockets is literally a, flat fold is not the word I want, a single fold binding. So it's a pretty easy finish. I think there would be other options for the pocket. It's about 4.5 inches square. It's not super easy to bind and make mitered corners on a 4.5 inch quilt, but that's what you have to do. And then you just top stitch it on to the coat. But you could theoretically take that same square and again, line it, turn it inside out, and then top stitch that on would be another method that might honestly be easier. But this does fit with the theme and they're cute, super cute. So that's done. Then the whole perimeter of the coat is finished with this single fold binding, and it's constructed then with the zipper. The teeth point toward the inside of the coat, which I found to be interesting and I don't absolutely love. I understand it. If you need to have a reversible coat, that's the way it's got to be. And then your zipper works both ways. And then you need a two-way zipper that works, you know, one way and also works the other way. I couldn't find a two-way zipper. I had already decided it wasn't going to be reversible, so my zipper only works the one way. You could turn the coat inside out, but you couldn't really zip it up. But let me zip it for you and show you what that looks like, because it doesn't lay super duper flat. I don't absolutely love it. And maybe someone else who has made the coat has messed with the placement of the binding such that it lays a little bit flatter. Am I going to be able to do up the zipper? I feel like a toddler here. There we go. Okay, zipper is done up. But can you see these, they kind of stick out in the front. And it's not bad. It's not bad at all, but it's not as flat as I would have loved. However, the edges are all finished and it was pretty easy to install the zipper and then to put the binding on. That kind of is what finishes the zipper edge and finishes the whole collar. The collar was probably the easiest part on the coat, so I was super happy with that. So it's done. Now, the one other thing is the hood. Again, because the coat is reversible, it would be awkward. Well, it could be awkward for hood and collar. How would they work together? So their solution, the designer's solution was that the hood is independent. And actually, I'm going to be sewing. It's the one thing I have left to do. There will be buttons on this little collar and the hood buttons on, only on one side. So if you were reversing it, you wouldn't wear the hood with it. Does that make sense? And I think that's a feasible solution. But again, if you were not making a reversible coat, you might want to do that differently. I don't know that I would attach the hood because the pattern is fitted such that the base of the hood fits around. It's a bit larger than the collar, so you couldn't just attach it without thinking that through or resizing it. So I don't know that I would do that. But anyway, I did go ahead and persevere with the buttons. Here's one place that I'm less than happy with my choice of thread. Do you see that? I wish I had picked the darker teal, more matching thread for the buttonholes, but I feel like once it's buttoned on, they will hardly show and it's just gonna be okay. So, I'm seeing a few comments. Let's see if there are any actual questions. And I'm sorry, the camera always wobbles when I do this. Let's go back. Lissa, back again. Angie, Kay, coat is so stinking cute. It is really cute. She's gonna love it. Beautiful, thanks for sharing these ideas, opening my world to the realm of possibilities with a long arm. That's so awesome, Darlene. Kay, show Susan your appreciation by hitting the like button. I would appreciate the thumbs up button. Really helps to get this video out there for people who are interested to find it. And I've tried to put the keywords in it, you know, quilted coat, because they're all the rage right now. And if people search for quilted coat, hopefully this will come up. And I hope if any of you decide to do a coat, you know, that these tips will be helpful to you, honestly. They'll make it a little bit easy for you. And I'm sorry my thumb keeps getting in front. Okay, good. Hi from Oklahoma. Kim, adorable, good. Well, let me give you one more look at it and I'll tell you the pattern name and the designer one more time before we go. So this is the Little Fox coat. I've opted to quilt it. The pattern does not require that, but the Little Fox coat and the designers are Bound Co. and Worthy Design Studio. So there's two joint designers of the coat. And there are other animals in their coat series, but this is the little fox. Let me get it back as far as I can so you can kind of see it to scale. The little fox coat. So it's heading off to my little granddaughter who's turning 4 in about 2 weeks' time. So just in the nick of time to pop it in the mail for her. Thanks you guys for joining me, and I will catch up with you next time. I hope this has been helpful.